On this week's Nesson Patriots podcast, we will recap all the moves the Patriots made during roster cuts. We'll preview the upcoming 2019 season and their Week 1 matchup against the Pittsburgh Steelers. 3, 2, 1. Hello and welcome to the Nesson Patriots podcast. I'm Doug Kide, joined as always by Zach Cox. Zach, how are you doing?
It's Week 1. I'm fired up. I'm fired up for some real football. I'm fired up that we're kind of done with this whole preseason nonsense. Sunday night, real football coming at me. I love it.
Absolutely, yeah. I got pretty sick of the preseason after about week 2 or 3.
The last week's a grind.
Was a bit of a grind. It was a little bit more entertaining than usual just because Demaryius Thomas and Josh Gordon and Julian Edelman played, and Jarrett Stidham's a little bit more entertaining than watching guys like Ryan Lindley or even like Brian Hoyer. But almost immediately after that week 4 preseason game, the Patriots had to make some roster cuts. They trimmed their roster down from, I think it was like 88 players, something like that, they had by the 4th preseason game, down to 53. It's been talked about a lot, but there are still some takeaways that we can give based off that. Most surprising moves probably for me would be cutting Brian Hoyer. Even though, some of us had it on our 53-man roster projections. The other one would be trading away Keon Crossan for the 6th-round pick, because I think that pretty much everyone had Crossan on their 53-man roster, and he's not even a guy that we considered that the Patriots would trade.
Yeah, I think the quarterback decision was probably the most significant roster cut, but the Crossan situation was the most surprising to me, especially since the Patriots already traded away Duke Dawson the previous day. That didn't really come as any bit of a surprise. It was almost a little bit surprising that the Patriots could even get anything for Duke Dawson after he hasn't played at all since he's been a second-round pick last year. But after that happened, we were pretty safely penciling Keon Crossan onto this roster, and then obviously there was that real kind of crazy sequence where Gunnar Olszewski got cut, and then there was a report about half an hour later that Gunnar Olszewski actually did not get cut. He actually made the team because the Patriots had traded away Keon Crossan, which opened up a roster spot. So definitely very surprising, but I think that's a move that's not really going to have a significant, a major significant impact on the team this year. I mean, Keon Crossan, as well as he did play this summer and as good as he is on special teams, he's a depth guy. The decision to cut ties with Brian Hoyer, and then Brian Hoyer's subsequent decision to not return to the Patriots there was reports that the Patriots might have wanted to bring him back on a 1-year deal or something like that. His decision to join Jacoby Brissett in Indianapolis. It is now Tom Brady, Jarrett Stidham as the quarterbacks going into this season, and obviously we're probably not going to see much of Stidham, but it is pretty, I think it's pretty exciting that he's the number 2 guy in there.
Yeah, definitely. I think it's definitely good for his development. And on Crossan, he was a depth piece that you wouldn't really trust if it came down to it and he was actually playing in on defense. I think they could miss him on special teams, but they do devote a lot more roster spots than most teams do with kind of core special teamers. So, it will be Jarrett Stidham backing up Tom Brady this season. I think that obviously the Patriots are hoping that decision won't make an impact, because that would mean that Tom Brady would be missing time. At the same time, I mean, Tom Brady is 42 years old, so every year that he gets older, every year that he plays on the Patriots and that he continues playing football, the odds of him getting injured and missing time probably do increase. Personally, I don't think there's a major drop-off between Hoyer and Stidham if Brady was going to miss time. I think that Stidham did a very good job this offseason of learning the Patriots playbook, getting himself acclimated into the offense. Obviously, it's probably not to the same degree as Brian Hoyer, who's been around the team since 2009 and is in this, what's the word I'm looking for? A tenure, has only been around for a year and a half. But so I always thought that Brian Hoyer was a good option if Brady was going to miss a series or 2 during a game or miss time during a game, whereas he probably isn't the best option if you're looking for that guy to actually carry the roster. But I do think that the Patriots are set up well enough with their offensive line, with a running game, that if it did come down to it, where Jarrett Stidham was asked to be the Patriots starting quarterback, Clearly, they wouldn't be as good as they are with Tom Brady, but I'm also not quite sure if this would be, a 4-12 season incoming.
Yeah, it didn't seem to be a significant difference there, as you mentioned, between Hoyer and Stidham, skill-wise at least. I do think kind of knowledge-wise and sort of just grasp of the system-wise, Brian Hoyer probably does have an edge in that category just because he's been with the team, or he had been with the team for so long. But honestly, if Tom Brady gets hurt, Patriots are probably screwed regardless.
Maybe, yeah.
And I don't think that the difference between putting Brian Hoyer out there and putting Jarrett Stidham in there is drastic enough to warrant kind of taking up another roster spot for another quarterback.
Yeah, and I mean, the Patriots did this in 2014, and the only reason it wasn't a bigger deal then is that the Patriots were merely cutting or trading, I guess it was, Ryan Mallett at the time, rather than someone who's, more established and better like Brian Hoyer. But, I mean, when the Patriots had Jimmy Garoppolo as their backup in 2014, he was probably even less prepared to get into a game than Jarrett Stidham is now. A lot, or maybe not a lot, but something has been made of the fact that the Patriots released Brian Hoyer rather than trading him. Like you mentioned, there was a report out there that the Patriots were interested in bringing back Hoyer. Clearly, that would not have been possible if they had traded him to another team. So I'd say that that's probably the top explanation for why the Patriots released Hoyer rather than trading him. But really, what it comes down to is that it seems like people are kind of, feigning outrage over this whole situation, because the most that the Patriots possibly would have got for Brian Hoyer was like a 6th or 7th round pick, which doesn't really matter. I mean, no one was heaping praise on the Patriots for trading away Keon Crossan for a 6th round pick. If anything, there was criticism when the Patriots traded away Duke Dawson for a 6/7th round pick. So to act like it's the worst thing in the world that the Patriots didn't get something for Brian Hoyer, ultimately those moves really don't matter in the grand scheme of things.
Yeah, it's a pretty insignificant storyline, I would think. And it did end up working out much better for Brian Hoyer.
Certainly, yeah.
The fact that he was cut rather than traded, because he's making a whole boatload of money in Indianapolis now. His contract, 3 years, $12 million, $9 million guaranteed, which, I mean, the Colts have a lot of money to throw around, so I guess they're cool with giving all that money to a 33-year-old backup quarterback. But good for Brian Hoyer. He was set to make less than $2 million with the Patriots this season, and now he's got a nice little payday coming his way.
Tough for, the family. I think he was probably expecting to stay around New England maybe, for the rest of his career or for a while. Now they're obviously, or I would assume, moving off to Indianapolis. But the fact that he's got $9 million guaranteed, probably could be sticking around there for 3 seasons. That obviously is a better thing for his family than it would be just to stay in one place. So those were the biggest takeaways. The biggest shock, I think, at the time was that the Patriots cut Demaryius Thomas, but they re-signed him 2 days later when they placed N'Keal Harry on injured reserve. This was another thing where there was a lot of, I don't even know what the correct terminology would be, but people kind of panicked a little bit, called N'Keal Harry a bust for winding up on IR in his first season.
A lot of hubbub.
Maybe I just don't get that fired up about this kind of stuff, but N'Keal Harry was coming in the season banged up, which means that he probably wasn't going to play for a few weeks anyway. It definitely puts him behind that he's starting the season on injured reserve, but the fact that you can replace him on the roster with Demaryius Thomas, and the fact that you've got Josh Gordon there, Philip Dorsett, Jacoby Myers, Julian Edelman obviously is the starter, I really don't know how much N'Keal Harry would have played anyway, and if he was going to play, it would have felt like they were kind of forcing him onto the field when there might have been some options on the roster who were actually better prepared to play early in the season than N'Keal Harry.
Yeah, on paper, obviously you don't want your first-round draft pick to land on IR and not be available for the first 8 weeks. But even before N'Keal Harry suffered his injury, he didn't look like... I mean, he was obviously a very kind of exciting, explosive player. He was making all those one-handed catches and diving catches and all sorts of stuff in training camp. But just from what we saw from him, he didn't look like a guy who was going to be a consistent contributor right away for the Patriots. It looked like a guy who was going to take a little while to adjust to the NFL game. I mean, the reason he had to make all those ridiculous catches was that he was never really creating separation from any of these defensive backs in practice. Now, it's unfortunate for him because this really sets him back in his development, I think, because when you're on IR, you're not allowed to practice. So he's not going to be able to practice for 6 weeks when the Patriots, because after week 6, you're allowed to return to practice. After week 8, you're allowed to play. And he's a guy who already has either missed or been limited in practice for the last 3 weeks,
yeah.
4 weeks. So that's more than 2 months away from the practice field by the time he finally comes back. I mean, I don't know if you can really expect much of anything from N'Keal Harry until maybe the final few weeks of the season. I mean, the Patriots are hoping to get him back for at some point after that Week 8 deadline, but I don't know. They're deep enough, I think, or they at least have the potential to be deep enough in this receiving core where having Demaryius Thomas in there over having maybe a slightly hobbled kind of setback in his development, N'Keal Harry, is definitely what's best for the team at the moment. And then we'll just have to wait and see what we see from Harry once he actually comes back onto the field. But I don't know. This would probably be a lot bigger of a deal and a lot kind of bigger of a storyline if it was another case like last year where the entire draft class ended up on injured reserve. But with the rest of the Patriots rookies looking so promising, I think it gives them a little bit of leeway on this.
And I have two slightly contrasting viewpoints on this. The first of which is that by Harry sitting out these first 8 weeks of the season, that gives guys like Thomas and Gordon and Myers and maybe Dorsett the opportunity to thrive. And if they, if in 8 weeks Demaryius Thomas has 400 or 500 receiving yards, then yeah, the Patriots probably aren't going to take him out of the starting offense. Or if Jacoby Myers does, or if whoever is replacing N'Keal Harry in that starting offense is flourishing, then Harry probably will be sitting once he returns. Other way to look at this, though, is that there's a lot of uncertainty in that wide receiver group, despite the fact that it does look pretty strong right now. Josh Gordon, you just never really know when he's going to be on or off the field. There's a lot of uncertainty there. He only played 11 games with the Patriots last season before his suspension was reinstated after week 15. So that could basically come at any time this season. Obviously, everyone's hoping that it doesn't, but the reality there is that Gordon could be off the field at any moment. Demaryius Thomas is coming off a torn Achilles, and he's a 31-year-old wide receiver that's going to be turning 32 on Christmas. He's another guy that you just don't really know if you can get 16 games out of Demaryius Thomas at this point. Jacoby Myers is an undrafted free agent. Philip Dorsett, I think, is best utilized as a number 4, number 5 wide receiver. So really, if anything goes wrong in that wide receiver core, and that's not even mentioning that Julian Edelman is a 33-year-old slot receiver who, doesn't have the best track record of playing 16 games. So I do think that despite the fact that N'Keal Harry is starting on injured reserve, there's a very good possibility that when he comes back, the Patriots will need to use him just because of all that other uncertainty at the wide receiver position. Patriots also could be getting back Cameron Meredith this season. He's starting the year on PUP, so he can come back after week 6. We'll kind of have to see what happens with that situation. But I don't know. I mean, I don't think this is the worst thing. I think that there are positive ways to look at the fact that N'Keal Harry is on injured reserve to start the season, that Cameron Meredith is on PUP to start the season, because that's built-in wide receiver depth insurance that you don't need to keep on your 53-man roster. You basically are going 9 deep at the wide receiver position on day 1 of the season, and you don't have to allocate roster spots to 2 of those guys.
Oh, for sure. And, I mean, even if N'Keal Harry was healthy and active, he wouldn't really solve the biggest kind of question mark for this Patriots receiving core right now, which is what Tom Brady talked about on WEI yesterday, just the unfamiliarity.
Yeah.
It's Julian Edelman and Philip Dorsett, who Tom Brady has said many times that he's obviously very comfortable with and has a lot of trust in. Josh Gordon looked that way for 2 months last year, 2.5 months, but he missed the entire offseason. Who knows what kind of shape he's in right now? Who knows what kind of how long that'll take to kind of rebuild that connection with him and Brady. And then Demaryius Thomas, who missed almost the entire offseason, and then 2 rookies in Jacoby Myers and Gunnar Olszewski. I mean, this is going to take some time for this whole thing to sort of congeal and come together, because everybody knows how much Tom Brady values trust in his receivers and connection with his receivers and chemistry and all whichever word you want to put on it. That stuff just, it doesn't happen immediately. It's going to take some time, as we saw with a guy like Jacoby Myers. I mean, watching him in practice, him and Tom Brady, we would say, oh, wow, these guys really seem to be on the same page. They really seem to be kind of building that connection, surprisingly so for a guy that just came in. Then you see him go out there in the preseason game, and it really wasn't that way. They were kind of out of sorts on all 3 of their attempted connections in that game. So this is going to take some time, and I'm really interested to see how this offense just looks at the start of the season, because obviously there's no Rob Gronkowski. The tight ends that they have, really anything that you get from them in the passing game is going to be almost kind of a bonus at this point. And obviously the running backs are kind of are solid and are all basically all back from last season. But with this receiving core, it's really hard to kind of predict what kind of production we're going to get from anybody outside of Julian Edelman probably in this group.
Yeah, I mean, and even Edelman, he's coming off the thumb injury, so his conditioning might not be where the Patriots want it to be coming back here. I do think that he'll probably still play, 80-90% of snaps in week 1, but those other wide receiver snaps probably will be divvied up between Gordon, Philip Dorsett, Jacoby Myers, and Demaryius Thomas, as long as all those guys are active in that week 1 game. I think they're all kind of going to be sharing that number 2 and 3 receiver role. Maybe Gordon plays the most out of all those guys just because he was here last year and he has a higher ceiling than Philip Dorsett. But it's definitely going to be interesting to see what does happen in that wide receiver position, and no one really knows. I think that running back, just getting into season preview stuff, is quite a bit more clear to everyone right now. I expect Sony Michel to be that bell cow running back and probably be even more involved than he was last season, because he'll have some pass catching duties this season. I'm in 4 fantasy leagues. I really wanted him to get on one of them, and I did not manage to do that. But I think that he was being super undervalued in fantasy leagues, because I think that he'll have over 1,000 yards and probably double-digit touchdowns as long as he stays healthy. James White will be that third down back. He'll probably share snaps with another running back on some of those third downs, but I do expect White to be on the field on most third downs for the Patriots. I look at Burkhead as being more of a change of pace back in both facets. I think that he's probably not going to steal many carries from Sony Michel, probably not going to steal many catches from James White, but he probably will be involved in carrying the ball and catching the ball. And then Damian Harris, personally, I would expect him to be inactive probably for the first week, maybe first few weeks of the season, and maybe he's more of a handcuff if Sony Michel goes down. But I don't think the Patriots necessarily need to use Damian Harris from week 1 of the season on.
Yeah, I guess it depends on how much they want to use him on special teams, whether they want to have him play a significant role there. I agree with almost everything you said there. I'm not fully convinced on Sony Michel yet, just because we haven't seen him stay healthy for any
injuries are definitely
lengthy period of time.
Yeah.
If he is healthy and if he plays 14 games this season, I think that's going to be a huge win for the Patriots, and I think
yes.
I agree with you. I think he can easily be a 1,000-yard back. What did he finish with? 900-something last year?
937, and I forgot how many games it was.
I think it was 13 games 13 overall.
Games, yeah.
And from what we've seen this summer, he should be at least more involved in the passing game. He looks like he has shown having the entire training camp and offseason under his belt, or training camp at least under his belt, seems to have improved his abilities in the passing game, which should make the Patriots offense a little less predictable this season. I think you could see a good amount of those 2 running back sets. We saw a lot during training camp, and maybe not so much during the actual preseason games themselves, but during training camp, being able to kind of just rotate Michel, White, and Burkhead kind of interchangeably through those, all 3 guys that if Sony's kind of pass catching ability that we've seen so far does translate, those are 3 guys that can all really contribute in both facets of the running back game. So I think that could open up a lot more options for the Patriots, especially, as we mentioned before, with the question marks at tight end.
Yeah, and I mean, at running back, if Michel does go down, they do have a lot of bodies there. Yep. They would be able to fill in.
Yeah, it's probably easily the deepest offensive position, I would say.
Yeah, for sure. And so Michel played 13 regular season games and 3 playoff games last season. So he played 16 total games last season, and he had 1,267 yards and 12 touchdowns.
6 touchdowns in the playoffs alone. Right?
I mean, if he does stay healthy for 16 games, then I think that you would see a 1,200-yard and 10 touchdown campaign. But I am not banking on that happening. I think that he probably will miss, at least a few games because of his knee injury history. But they would have Damian Harris and Rex Burkhead to fill in at that point. They've also got Brandon Bolden, but he's much more of a fill-in if they absolutely positively need it. Moving on to tight ends, because we ran the gamut on wide receivers there. They're starting off the season with Ryan Izzo and Matt LaCosse. Lance Kendricks is suspended for 1 game. Ben Watson is suspended for 4 games. I don't expect a lot of receiving production out of this position this season. I think that despite the 4-game suspension, Watson probably still will be the Patriots' most productive tight end, and I don't even really know who would be next in line after him. Maybe Lacoste, maybe Izzo. They're almost, I don't know. It's maybe Kendrick. It's an interesting position.
Yeah, my bold prediction a couple months ago, or a couple weeks ago, whenever it was, on our buddy Andrew Callahan's podcast, was that all of the Patriots tight ends this year combined are going to have fewer receiving yards than Rob Gronkowski did last season.
It's not crazy.
I'm sticking with that prediction is just looking less and less bold by the day, because there's really no kind of proven pass catching target in this group other than Ben Watson. You would say, who's probably a safe bet to have Ben Watson get 350 receiving yards this season. But I mean, Ryan Izzo is more of a blocker. Matt Lacoste hasn't really proven much of anything at the NFL level, and he's been hurt for the last month or so. Lance Kendricks has had some good seasons in the past, but we don't even know if the Patriots are going to retain him after he comes back from that suspension. So a ton of question marks in this group. I think this is a position group that will be kind of fluctuating over the course of the season. I could definitely see the Patriots adding to this group if the combination that they have right now is not working. But as you mentioned, I don't think tight ends will be a significant portion of the Patriots' passing game, which is the first time we've really been able to say that about this team in close to a decade. I mean, because the last season where Rob Gronkowski missed significant time, the Patriots had Martellus Bennett, who was really their only, ever since Aaron Hernandez, is really their only kind of quality number 2 tight end who's been able to contribute in the passing game. So it's going to be kind of a new day for this Patriots offense. I think that is the number one question for this team going into this season, is how do they replace Rob Gronkowski's production, not necessarily at tight end, but just over the whole kind of spectrum of this offense.
Offensive line is a lot clearer. Isaiah Wynn at left tackle, Joe Tooney at left guard, Ted Karras at least to start the season at center, Shaq Mason at right guard, and Marcus Cannon at right tackle. They've got Corey Cunningham as their swing tackle, Jermaine Illuminor as their guard / backup or emergency tackle, and then Russell Bodine as their backup center. Not a lot to say here. It's shakier than it was last season because David Andrews is out for the season with the blood clot in his lungs, and you've got a new left tackle in there with Isaiah Wynn. But I think that Wynn is going to be a very good player this year. I think that Ted Karras is going to fill in admirably. Like he's not going to be as good as David Andrews because, I mean, he's the backup. There's a reason why he's the backup. But between Karras and Bodine, I think they're in, as good a shape as they possibly could be given what happened with Andrews so late in the preseason.
Yeah, I'm really interested to see how they handle this Karras-Bodine situation moving forward. It seems like a pretty safe bet that Ted Karras will at least begin the season as the starter since he's been here for so long and he does have experience in there, and Russell Bodine just got here 4 days ago. But Bodine's also a guy who started 74 games over the course of his career. I think he started all but 6 possible games since he entered the NFL in 2014. So this isn't some kind of journeyman backup that they got in just to sort of fill a spot there. This is a guy who has extensive experience starting at the NFL level. So I would not be surprised if there's a situation where he does end up becoming the starter within the next couple of weeks. Obviously, that's going to all depend on how both of those players perform over the next couple of weeks, how kind of Tom Brady feels about his connection with both of those players. But it was a very significant trade in my eyes. I mean, this was much more the Illuminor and the Cunningham trades were just kind of guys who were probably going to get cut anyway. Bring them in. Maybe they've got some potential. Maybe Dante Scarnecchia can kind of unlock something in them. But Bodine's a guy who's had success at the NFL level for a good while now. So he's definitely a significant addition, and I think that battle between him and Karras is going to be very interesting.
Let's just tackle the front 7 all at once because there's so many moving pieces in there and so many different positions, which you can argue that one player is this or that or whatever it's going to be. Patriots, I think, will have 3 pretty significantly different sets on their defense. It's going to be their base, which I expect to be a 3-4. Their nickel is what they're going to be in most of the time. That will actually be their base. Mm-hmm. And then they're going to be in some sort of dime configuration on obvious passing down. So I think that as far as their base is concerned, Michael Bennett probably won't be that involved in it. I think that on obvious plays where the other team is running the ball, the Patriots are going to have a guy like Adam Butler or Byron Cowart matched with Danny Shelton and Lawrence Guy, so you can actually give Michael Bennett some snaps off. And then, at least from what we saw in the preseason, their base defense was Kyle Van Noy and Jamie Collins at outside linebacker, and Dante Hightower and either a Landon Roberts or a Juwan Bentley at inside linebacker. And then during nickel sets, Jamie Collins would shift inside to take either Roberts or Bentley off the field, and then someone like John Simon or like Chase Winovich or, maybe who else would be in that mix? Shalik Calhoun, they would come on the field to kind of, boost the pass rush a little bit. And then in that, amoeba formation that they run in obvious passing situations, third and long, it's usually a dime so that there's, 7 defensive backs on the field. So then you've probably got Michael Bennett with his hand in the dirt and then 3 linebackers basically surrounding him. I don't know exactly who those 3 linebackers are going to be. It's probably going to be a rotation to keep guys fresh, but any assortment of Dante Hightower, Jamie Collins, Kyle Van Noy, John Simon, Chase Winovich, Shalik Calhoun are kind of those rushers who are going to be coming from all angles. So it's a good way to keep everyone fresh. There's going to be 3 pretty significant different looks. And I like this front 7 this season. It doesn't have, the most high-end talent, but I think that it's a lot of pieces that match together well.
I agree. And the versatility of this group is probably at the highest level that we've seen in a while here in New England.
Yeah.
They just have so many players that can do multiple things. I mean, Dante Hightower and Kyle Van Noy, Jamie Collins all can play outside linebacker, inside linebacker. Chase Winovich can stand up or do hand in the dirt. Same with Shalik Calhoun. Same with John Simon. And you really see that in the amoeba package that you were talking about that they've been trotting out on third down. They did a good amount of that type of thing last season, but it seems to be even more sort of amorphous this year, at least from what we've seen in the preseason. It's basically just Michael Bennett or Adam Butler or another kind of faster pass rushing defensive tackle down over the nose, and then a bunch of guys just wandering around, a bunch of kind of like creepers just walking up and down the line of scrimmage. It really makes things difficult for opposing offenses, as we saw. I believe they rolled this out in the Vikings game last year, and Kirk Cousins had no idea what to do with it. And I think just with the kind of the variety of skill sets that they have from all these guys, especially at linebacker, I think that this does have the potential to be the best defense that the Patriots have had in a long time here. And I know that most of the players on the Patriots defense were pretty salty that that nobody gave them enough credit last season. They were a good defense last year, but I think with all of that we just talked about in the front 7, and then the kind of the depth in the secondary, which we'll get to in a second, this has the potential to be one of the best defenses in the NFL, I think.
Definitely. And on that secondary, you got Stephon Gilmore definitely as a starting cornerback, Patrick Chung and Devin McCourty certainly as starting safeties. And then the other spots in that secondary, there's usually going to be 5 defensive backs on the field. It could be some assortment of Jason McCourty, J.C. Jackson, Jonathan Jones. Maybe you see Duron Harmon's going to be in the mix as well. So I do expect Gilmore, Devin McCourty, and Patrick Chung to probably finish the season as long as they stay healthy with right around 95% snaps, whatever it's going to be. And then the rest of the guys in there might all kind of be sharing those number 4, 5, and 6 roles, based on matchups, based on everything else. I think that by the end of the season, J.C. Jackson probably will be the Patriots' number 2 cornerback. He'll probably finish with the second most snaps just because of the talent level that they have there and how good he was last season. But it seems like at least to start the season, Jason McCourty will be heavily involved in that starting defense.
Definitely. Jason McCourty was really entrenched as that kind of second starting cornerback throughout the entire summer. We barely saw any of J.C. Jackson with the first defense, despite how well he played last year and how well he played so far this summer. So maybe they were just kind of waiting to roll that out in week 1. We'll see. I'm sure J.C. Jackson will at least be significantly involved in the game plan this weekend, especially with how well he played against Juju Smith-Schuster last year. And all of those guys you mentioned, even beyond them, I'm interested to see how they use Joan Williams, Joan Williams and Obi Melifonwu this season. They're 2 guys that are kind of buried on the depth chart right now, even though Joan Williams had a very strong preseason in his first kind of taste of NFL action. I was interested to hear what Bill and Steve Belichick had to say about both of them on a conference call we had with them yesterday, Tuesday. They really seem like both they have high hopes and some plans in mind for both of those players, just because they're so big. They're two of the biggest defensive backs in the entire NFL. I mean, there are 9. I looked this up yesterday. There are 9 defensive backs currently on NFL rosters who are 6'3" or taller, and Joan Williams and Obi Melifonwu are 2 of them. Obi is actually the only 6'4" defensive back in the NFL right now, and I don't think either of them are kind of finished products at this point. And obviously, Obi Melifonwu has never really kind of lived up to his athletic and sort of size potential at the NFL level. But if the Patriots can find a way to use one or both of those guys in sort of matchup situations, match up against a bigger wide receiver inside, or match up against a tight end, or match up against kind of somebody like that, someone only with their sort of body type can match up against. I think that can just add a whole extra dimension to this defense, because I don't think either of those players are going to see many kind of traditional snaps, I guess you could call them, at least early in the season, just given the talent above them on the depth chart. But I do think that there is a way that the Patriots can utilize both of those players to some extent.
Yeah, I would certainly put Juwan Williams on the field actually before Obi Melifonwu, just based on what he did this summer. I think that he will have a role against bigger wide receivers or more athletic tight ends.
And we did see Williams play exclusively at safety in the final preseason game too. So Patriots are moving him around.
I think it's notable that the Patriots are hoarding big defensive backs, and maybe hoarding is too strong a word, but they've got Obi and Juwan Williams, and they've also got Stephon Gilmore, who's over 6 feet tall. As you mentioned, there's not a lot of 6'3" defensive backs in the NFL, and the Patriots have 2 of them, while also hoarding so many big wide receivers. Josh Gordon, Demaryius Thomas, and Cameron Meredith are all 6'3" or taller. And N'Keal Harry is 6'2", 225, whatever it is. So
Jacoby Myers is
6'1", 6'2", something like that. So those are the type of players that you want the taller defensive backs to be covering, but the Patriots have them. Yeah. So that makes it more difficult for other teams to match up against those bigger wide receivers, because there are fewer of them out there, because the Patriots have them on their roster. I'm not sure if that's a complete coincidence that's happening, but I definitely find it notable.
Yeah, it's definitely been a trend. I mean, that was the main trend we saw throughout the offseason, even with some of the receivers they brought in who aren't here anymore. It was height from a team that usually doesn't place a huge value on wide receiver height. So that was definitely a interesting trend, and now we're seeing it, as we mentioned, on the defensive side of the ball as well. This is what Bill Belichick loves to do. He loves to kind of find these, I don't know if you would call it an inefficiency or what, but it's like the Patriots using a fullback when everybody else is going away from fullback. So I'll be really interested to see how this sort of manifests itself once the regular season starts.
Let's talk about the Steelers real quick. No Le'Veon Bell at running back, as it was the case last year. Got Antonio Brown at wide receiver. A little bit of a different look for them on the defensive side of the ball, with some more athletic linebackers. Mark Barron and Devin Bush are those inside linebackers. The Steelers have usually, even dating back to the 90s, kind of utilized bigger, thumping inside linebackers, the Greg Lloyd types. But now they are getting kind of smaller there in the middle. Wide receiver situation, definitely not as strong as it has been in years past. And that's something that, Patriots had to worry about every week or every year that they would play them, is how would you cover all these guys all at once. Now it's basically the Juju Smith-Schuster show, and you've got Dante Moncrief behind him, Deontay Johnson, the rookie, James Washington, second-year player, Ryan Switzer, the slot guy. So it will be interesting. The most interesting thing to me is how the Patriots are going to match up against those Steelers wide receivers. I personally would not be surprised, given the amount of success he had last season, if it is J.C. Jackson on Juju Smith-Schuster, and then with help from safeties, and then just trust Stephon Gilmore to basically completely blank Dante Moncrief, which I really don't think they would have that hard of a time doing.
No, I don't think Dante Moncrief is that great, frankly. Right. I think he's okay. I think you'll probably see James Washington, if he continues to play the way that we've kind of seen him play in the preseason and with the kind of hype that's surrounding him, I think he probably will end up as the Steelers' number 2 receiver before long. He actually had a pretty good game against the Patriots last season. He only had 3 catches, but he had a long, big gain against Jason McCourty down the sideline, had another catch and run that went for 24, 25 yards. So I think he's a good young player. I have him on a couple of my fantasy teams, so I'm banking on that. But no, I mean, the Steelers are kind of, their calling card throughout the years has been finding these receivers in the middle of the draft. I mean, James Washington's a second-round pick, so that's not technically middle of the draft, but they got Deontay Johnson in the 3rd round this year. Juju Smith-Schuster was a 3rd-round pick a couple years ago. They have been very good traditionally at finding these guys that weren't top 10 picks and turning them into...
on the line. Emmanuel Sanders was in there. Mike Wallace was in there.
Martavis Bryant.
Obviously,
go
Antonio
all the way back
Brown,
to
Hines Ward. And they've always had 2 strong receivers in there. So, yeah, it'll be interesting to see who does emerge next to Juju Smith-Schuster because someone has to.
Definitely.
Beyond that, a lot of things kind of look the same. TJ Watt is that big outside linebacker that should be, pressuring quarterbacks even more this season. Still got Cameron Hayward and Stephon Tuitt there on their defensive line. So it's certainly not going to be an easy week 1 challenge for the Patriots, but maybe not quite as strong of a team as they've had in years past.
Yeah, they do have it's basically almost everybody from their defense last year is back this year.
Right.
And they've added the 2 names you mentioned, Devin Bush and Mark Barron at linebacker. And then they brought in Steven Nelson from the Chiefs at cornerback to replace Artie Burns, who's had some real tough times over the last couple seasons.
Yeah.
I don't think Steven Nelson's all that good either. Tom Brady beat him a couple times in that AFC Championship game. I know he had a pretty costly pass interference call in that first Chiefs game last year too. So he's not a Pro Bowl level player that they're bringing in. I still think Joe Hayden's a very good player on the other side of the field. But this is a good Steelers defense, especially if they can get after Brady the way they were able to in that game last year. That was kind of, we saw some of the uncharacteristic Brady shakiness in that game where he was sort of bailing out of throws and kind of throwing too early and not wanting to take these sacks and just kind of making strange decisions. But that was also a game where the Patriots committed, I think, like 7 or 8 penalties on the offensive line, 14 penalties overall. The Patriots played about as badly as they could on offense in that game, and they still ended up having a chance to win in the final moments. That last Tom Brady incompletion ended up like hitting the ground in the end zone. So I think this is going to be a pretty close matchup. I think this is a very good matchup to start the season from a kind of viewing entertainment value standpoint. I think I would probably give the edge to the Patriots if I had to.
What's the line? Do you know? Is it 6.5
I do not know the line. I will look it up right now.
While you look that up, we're going to play America's favorite game. Guess where a guy that we've never heard of went to college. And I've got 2 of the greatest names of all time for this one. They're both Steelers linebackers. I've not heard of either one of them. I have no idea where they went to school. I've done no research on this. As you can see, their Wikipedia links are still blue. So there's no cheating whatsoever going on. Ulysses Gilbert III, our 17th president, and Tuzar Skipper. So let's start with Ulysses Gilbert III. Where do you think he went to school?
I'll say USC. Southern
USC. I'm going to go with South Carolina State. I'm going to go with FCS on this one. He went to Akron.
Akron.
We were both pretty far off.
Very far off.
All right.
Who's our other one here?
Tuzar Skipper. Oh, did you see?
I did not see.
I did not see either.
I wonder if he's related to Dan Skipper.
I'm going to go with Tulane on this one.
Tulane. I will go with Troy.
Let's see what it is. Tuzar Skipper went to Toledo. We got an Akron and a Toledo.
I was close to saying Miami of Ohio, but which also would have been.
Wow, they're in the same conference, right? They're in the MAC.
I think that's 2 MACs.
Both in the MAC.
Double MAC.
Double. I don't know what they are.
Are they? Is Akron independent now?
I don't know. Nope, they're in the MAC. 2 MAC teams.
Who did I get last year? Was it Cornell Armstrong? I think. I think it was Cornell Armstrong because I saw the other day that he was released by whoever he happens to be playing for now.
Poor Cornell Armstrong.
The shining moment of my sports reporting
Cornell
career.
Armstrong, Southern Miss.
Yep.
All right, well, that will do it for this week's episode of the Nesson Patriots podcast. For Zach Cox, for Tuzar Skipper, for Ulysses Grant III. What was his name? Ulysses Gilbert III. Keep it on Nest.com for all of your Patriots coverage. Follow me on Twitter at Doug Kide. Follow Zach on Twitter at Zach Cox Nesson. We will have a pregame show before the Patriots take on the Steelers on Sunday around
6 p.m.
6 p.m. So tune into that.